Hello and welcome back to US History. Today we're going to be talking about one of the closest and most controversial elections of all time. Go ahead and write down our essential question. That's the question you're going to be able to answer at the end of the video, which was, why was the election of 2000 so controversial? As a reminder, you can pause this video to give yourself some time to write notes. You can also rewind if you missed something and click on closed captioning for subtitles in English or another language if needed. So in this video, we're going to be learning who ran for president in the 2000 election. I'll rant a little bit about why Florida is the worst state, and we will summarize the main issues from this election. So let's get into it. The election of 2000 is special because we actually had 3 people running for president. So Al Gore is a Democratic nominee, ran against former Texas Governor George W. Bush, the Republican nominee, and a third-party candidate named Ralph Nader was nominated by the Green Party. And this is a party that focuses on environmental issues like global warming and protecting the planet. So what exactly are third parties? A third party is just any political party that is not Democratic or Republican, which are the 2 major parties in our country. Third parties are typically smaller and usually focus on a specific issue they find really important. We don't often see third parties make it all the way to the presidential election, and one reason for that is because third-party candidates can be seen as spoilers, and hey, that is a vocab word, so you should write this one down. A third-party spoiler is someone who takes votes away from a major party candidate, which can then impact the election. So for example, in the 2000 election, Ralph Nader got 2.8 million votes. If he didn't run, those millions of voters would have had to pick a different candidate, either Republican or Democrat. And this could have changed the winner because the 2000 election was so close. How close? Well, the popular vote was less than a 1% difference between Gore and Bush, with Al Gore having the lead. But neither Bush or Gore had secured the 270 electoral votes needed to win the Electoral College. Remember that from our last video? So the election came down to who would win Florida, which we're still counting their votes. So Florida was too close to call because Bush was leading there by only 500 votes. That's about only the size of the MSHS junior class. So because it was so close, election rules state that Florida would recount the votes and make sure that they are accurate. And this brings me to why Florida is the worst. So during the recount of the votes, it was found that thousands of voters did not punch their ballot correctly. This is that piece of paper used to vote. Therefore, their votes were never even counted by the machine. This created instant memes with the photo of this guy trying to figure out who these voters were trying to select for president. It was a mess, and the magnifying glass wasn't helping. Al Gore then demanded a recount by hand. And if I were in his shoes, I probably would too. Remember that the president would be determined by who won Florida, and Bush had only 500 more votes than him. If enough of those mismarked votes were for Gore, then he would become president. Ultimately, the Supreme Court would make the final decision. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the United States, and what they decide is law. In the case of Bush versus Gore, the court chose to end the recount, therefore selecting George W. Bush as president. This was a 5-4 decision and a very controversial one. The 5 justices that voted to make George W. Bush president were all conservative justices picked by Republican presidents. The 4 justices that voted against this decision were the liberal justices picked by Democratic presidents. So this vote was along party lines, and some Americans felt like it was more of a political decision and not necessarily the fair thing to do. In the end, the 2000 election resulted in George W. Bush beating Al Gore. Bush would be reelected in 2004 and served 8 years as president. I want to summarize some of the main issues from this election. So first, The election is another example of the popular vote failing. Again, the candidate who received the most votes did not become president because of the Electoral College system. We also saw Ralph Nader as a third-party candidate possibly spoil the election by taking away votes that might have gone to Gore if it was only Bush and Gore running. We saw how thousands of voters in Florida never even had their vote count because they couldn't follow directions, and how the Supreme Court made the final and controversial decision with Bush versus Gore to select the president. Thank you for your hard work following along with this video. I do want you to double check your guided notes and make sure you've completed all sections before moving on. Until next time.